Everything we're expecting and hoping for at Apple's 2 June events today. It's time for WW, Apple's annual event that has always seen the new versions of Apple's software platforms and has often seen hardware announcements too. But this year, more than any other, Apple really wants eyes on the conference's opening keynote, and they've been advertising it on YouTube, Instagram and other platforms. So, is WWDC still for developers? Yes it is. Thanks for watching. No, but seriously, even though the opening keynote has become more and more for the general public over the past years, WWDC proper is what happens throughout the whole week, with deep dives into those software platforms, iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, watchOS and macOS. And it seems this year, according to Apple's own job listing that was hastily corrected, homeOS might be joining the party too. This seems to be the most likely name for the HomePod software, although many have speculated that it could incorporate tvOS too, being the OS that supports Apple's HomeKit smart home devices. But this year, more than many before, we know very little about the changes coming on the software side, which makes the event that much more exciting. iOS is expected to get updated lock screens, although this might not even be announced if it's specifically designed for the rumoured always-on displays coming on the next generation of iPhone, which will have variable refresh rate displays up to 120Hz. There have also been some minor tweaks seen to the way that iOS settings are displayed, with pill-shaped options rather than full width that we have right now. Not exactly a killer feature, but still, it's different. Some of the things I've been hoping to see is that after the trend for customising icons and using shortcuts, that Apple will see how much a lot of people want this and offer new theming options, possibly with HomeKit for iOS and iPadOS. Google's latest Android version also has a lot of colour options appearing this year, so it would be great not to have the fandroids gloating about the better thing that they have for another year. We've also heard that food tracking might well come too, but that would be pretty awesome, having it built into the OS, and I guess that would be integrated with watchOS too. Finally, last year I was hoping that the LiDAR built into the iPhone 12 models would be able to allow portrait mode video, and I believe that Apple were working on this, as the LiDAR builds a depth map which is incredible at autofocus in terms of knowing how far everything is away. If they can combine that information with computational photography for a nice blurry background in a video, that would be awesome. Apparently we could also get an astrophotography mode. Over at iPadOS, everyone is hoping for some bigger changes to the way that the operating system itself works, a bit further from iOS. Basically, as well as the iOS changes, we're expecting changes to how widgets work so that they can be placed anywhere, improvements to multitasking, though it's unclear what that would look like, improved integration with external displays, hopefully to the point where they can be used as more of an extended workspace and not just a mirror of the iPad display. Of course, then interacting with it will require a keyboard and pointing device, whether that's a trackpad or a mouse, but it's also thought that Apple might introduce their Pro apps for the iPad, with Final Cut and Logic being the big names. But remember that Apple earlier this year changed the registration of the trademark for Final Cut Pro and also for their iWork apps, so that they can be used as a subscription service going forward too. Either way, right now the power of the M1 is a little underused, especially with 5GB memory cap per app, even though the M1 comes with up to 16 gigs of unified memory on the iPad. tvOS will get deeper integration with HomeKit devices, I'd guess, and the colour calibration tool could easily have been a new OS feature, but Apple introduced it with the new model in April, so perhaps they do have more up their sleeves. Or maybe we'll get a trailer for something new on Apple TV Plus and some Ted Lasso merchandise. You know, because developers love Ted Lasso. watchOS could well add more to Apple Fitness Plus, with new fitness routines, maybe support for group workouts, maybe with other members of your family in the same room or in other locations, where you can compete on the burn bar or the rings, or maybe even actual live classes coming to Fitness Plus for the first time, a bit like Peloton does. A new Mind app will also help Apple to address mental health along with physical health in the next software version. Snore detection could also come to the watch, possibly called sleep health or something similar, and perhaps there could be some detection of conditions like sleep apnea too. And then we will get onto hardware. But before we get into hardware, I just want to mention the t-shirt design that we were talking about last week, which we basically crowdsourced from you guys with your emojis, is available to buy now. Here is the design. It looks pretty cool. We've got a whole bunch of your emojis on there. I think there's over 100. but I'll be honest, I didn't actually count them. But you can pick one up at icavedave.com/merch. There's water bottles, there's mugs, there's all sorts of stuff, as well as the clothing if you don't want to get a t-shirt. But it's only going to be available until the end of this week. It will go off sale on Friday, because that's when WW ends. So if you want one, grab it now. But back to the hardware. As we all know, WWDC is a software event where Apple doesn't release hardware, except in 2017, where Apple announced updates to the iMac, the MacBook, the MacBook Pro. They announced the iMac Pro, they announced the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, and also announced the first HomePod. And then in 2019, they announced the cheese grater Mac Pro with the Pro Display XDR, and last year they announced the transition to Apple Silicon. Okay, that's not a piece of hardware per se, but the M1 is hardware, so I'm going to take it. As usual, the renders in this video are provided by the very talented Apple Tomorrow, who also rendered the lab behind me. Go and check out Sard on Twitter at Apple_Tomorrow. So in order of, for me, the most likely to the least likely but possible, MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch tops the list, and introduces the M1X, or whatever Apple decides to call their high-performance variant of the M1 generation, but I'm still going to go with M1X until I'm told otherwise later. Rumoured to have 10 cores, 2 efficiency and 8 high-performance cores, along with 16 or 32 core GPU. These MacBooks are also rumoured to bring back MagSafe, HDMI ports, and the SD card reader built into the system, along with improved displays, possibly with mini LED XDR displays. These are questionable though due to possible supply constraints, but we've been seeing conflicting information on both sides of this. I'd expect the pricing to be consistent on these machines with the ones that they replaced from Intel at $17.99 and $23.99 for the 16-inch model, maybe adding $100 to the price if the XDR displays are ready, just like the iPad Pro 12.9-inch did, although with the removal of the touch bar, this price bump might not be needed. And also, Apple are making the processors themselves, so they're not paying that Intel tax either. Next, the redesigned Mac Mini. We've seen leaked schematics turned into renders by John Prosser and Ian Zeblo, but there's no word on whether this could be launched, though my bet would be it would be alongside the 2 Pro laptops. There were next to no rumours about the M1 Mac Mini coming in November either, alongside the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro, so a lack of leaks is not really a strong argument for it not coming, nor is it a good argument that the larger iMac won't be coming either. What a segue. The iMac we're expecting is between 30 and 32 inches for the display, with my money on it being a 31.5-inch panel, although they may market it still as 32. And just as with the MacBook Pros and the Mac Mini, this iMac will also carry the M1X chip, which to me suggests that they would also launch it sooner rather than later. They don't want it to be overlapping with the M2 chips that come in October, which, as we've explained before, won't be there to compete on raw power with the M1X, but will perform 20 to 25% faster than the M1 because of the individual cores being faster inside. M1X will likely perform between 80 and 100% faster than M1 on multi-threaded tasks, and even faster in graphics processing, assuming the higher 32-core GPU versions. And that M2 that we've just mentioned, that will come with the A15 cores, that will basically be the MacBook Air that we've been talking about. That is expected to launch in October later this year. That's the one with the pretty colours, although what if we get awesome colours on the MacBook Pros today too? That would be pretty amazing. There's also an outside chance that we could see Apple Silicon Mac Pros being teased but not released. I'm still betting that that contains multiple M1X SoCs, although how they're combining it to work together is way beyond me. But the core counts line up perfectly. 20 cores with 4 efficiency and 16 performance is a pair of M1Xs, and 40 cores with 8 efficiency and 32 performance cores is 4 of them working together. And that would also give a maximum of 128 GPU cores. Now, as I say, I don't think we'll see this released, but it could well get announced for December, which has historically been when high-end Pro machines from WWDC, like the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro, get their releases. Although there is also a chance that we could see an Intel version being released today, maybe just to fulfill a contract, and then the cooler Apple Silicon one later in the year. And of course that would be all, except that we now have a second event just 2 hours after the beginning of WWDC for Apple's spatial audio being introduced, and potentially Apple's lossless audio being rolled out to the AirPod range through an update to AirPlay, giving the throughput needed to get all that sweet musical data into your ear holes. But could there be AirPods 3 introduced here too? Maybe. So that's what I'm expecting to be announced today. Let me know in the comments if you've got any other ideas. We probably won't go through and answer these in time for everything happening. We will be doing a live stream tonight. I really don't know when it's going to be yet. Probably going to schedule it for 8:30 PM, so just after the spatial audio one finishes. I'm guessing that's only going to be a 30-minute event, but basically as soon as that finishes, you know you can come over to the channel and you will see us live. Sarambites may well be with us. He's said that he can get on, but obviously things sometimes change on a day like today, so fingers crossed. But make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on so you don't miss it, and we'll get into your iCave answers now. Marcin Kowalczyk asks, iCave answers, I wonder, will M1X be set at different TDPs dependent on the target platform? Lower on the laptops, higher on the M1X iMac, bonkers in the Mac Pro. Now, I don't think they're going to do this. I think it's purely going to be about how much of that heat they can dissipate. I think it's going to be about having beefier coolers on the bigger stuff so that they can just keep it cool for longer and let it thermal throttle if it needs to. However, remember, these are going to be maybe 35 watt chips, so it's not going to make a huge difference. And even in the Mac Pros, I've got a feeling that because they're using multiple SoCs, there's going to be enough separation between them that they're not going to have heat overlap, if that's a real term. I think they're going to have individual coolers, and I think they're going to be able to just dissipate so much heat. It's probably going to be quite surprising. But there isn't just going to be that much heat to dissipate. We haven't seen M1's throttle at all in the Mac Mini or in the MacBook Pros because they've got active cooling. So I don't think we're going to have an issue with it. The Golden S asks, iCave answers, what if Apple makes a dedicated GPU so it can get back its speed for the Mac Pro? I still can't believe an integrated graphics can have 3090 speeds. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that's because integrated graphics in the past have always been kind of there as a second-class citizen, and I don't think anyone's really tried to make integrated graphics as good as they can be because they would just be too expensive in most cases to include it with the CPU on the same die. I know that AMD is doing a lot with their APUs and they've done some really good work. However, I think Apple can absolutely nail this, and especially with the Mac Pros, if they're going to be splitting that GPU across 4 dies. I think the reason that dedicated graphics have always been thought of as the better ones is because you were buying a specific graphics card to add to a specific CPU, and it was just that the good people for making GPUs were not necessarily the same people that were good at making CPUs. So they do a different task, but if you're designing it all to work together and use that same pool of memory, I think that's going to be the fastest way you can do it anyway, especially if, because it's using an ARM cores, it's not putting off that much heat. Ethan Bradler, iCave answers, will the M2 MacBook Air in colours be announced late 2021 and shipped in time for Christmas holidays, like the timeline for the M1 last year, because I'm considering getting that MacBook Air for my course in 2022. Fingers crossed, yes. The expectation is that M2 will be released in October, and I think that is going to be the flagship machine for it. So I'm pretty sure that they will be aiming at least to launch it in October this year. Whether there will be delays because of the chip shortages, which is not chip shortages on things like M2 or on M1 or M1X, it's chip shortages on the other kind of bits that go on your logic board. It's not on, it's things like power controllers and all that kind of stuff. It's not to do with the cutting edge stuff that Apple is doing, but with the older stuff that is kind of commodity that people use in cars and stuff. Joe asks, iCave answers, will you ever see Apple develop a new wireless charger like MagSafe other than for the iPad Pro? Ever is a very long time, so probably we will see something else like that coming, but we also have reports that Apple is working on a version of the AirPower that actually works, which basically was a mat where you could put down your devices anywhere you wanted on it that are wirelessly charging, like your AirPods, your Apple Watch, your phone, and they would just click into charging mode regardless of how they were set, because it had multiple coils inside. They had heat dissipation issues with that, though, in the past. But also, according to reports, Apple is looking into beamforming wireless charging, where you would have a charging point in the room, and it will basically find the devices in the room and direct the energy to them. It's very inefficient at the moment, and I think Xiaomi has put out some adverts explaining what they want to do with it, but it's very much experimental at this point. Eliza Aquino asks, Apple bought Curious AI earlier this year. Do you think that means that there is a VR headset in development coming soon? Yes, we know that Apple is working on AR. We know that they've got the VR headset on the way, which we believe is going to have two 8K displays, one for each eye, and then it eye tracks to make sure that it's rendering the right parts of that display at the highest resolution. There's also Apple Glass on the way, which is an AR headset. We don't know how soon they are, but it's one of those things that could just get a little bit of a tease at this event, maybe. Maybe we'll see some developer hardware coming for it. Essentially a developer transition kit. Evan Rogers, iCave answers, Dave's wildest guess about WWDC is Apple Glass or Apple VR headset, possibly just an SDK for developers to start working on it, and maybe some developer level hardware, something along the lines of Google Glass Explorer Edition, so it's not a consumer ready device, but something that you can start working on how it would interact with the world, and then translate that across to the consumer hardware when that comes down the line. Greg West, iCave answers, the renderings of the upcoming, hopefully, Mac Mini don't show an SD card reader, and that seems like an absolute need for anyone seeking a higher end Mac Mini. Content creators would be the primary market for that device, and a front-loading SD card reader, while not aesthetically appealing, is truly required. Thoughts? So I'm probably the one YouTuber in the world that doesn't think that we need an SD card reader, and the main reason is because the only people that think we need SD card readers are YouTubers. And also, half the YouTubers that are going, we need SD card readers, how come we haven't got SD card readers, it's a professional port, also don't use SD cards anymore. You'll find that many of the YouTubers use CFast cards, they use red cartridges if they're using like a Blackmagic Red Dragon or something like that, or most cameras now have a USB port on board where you can plug in a USB-C cable and just directly download from the camera. So while I understand that it's a frustration for some people, it's also maybe 5% of the market of people that actually buy a Mac Mini. If the SD card reader is coming to the MacBook Pro, that does make sense, because when you're in the field you don't necessarily want to be carrying all of your stuff around, but for a Mac Mini, where you're going to have it on your desktop and you want to set up your desk so that it's as usable as possible, you're probably going to have an ingest station where you're going to have your SD card readers or whatever card reader you need for your devices. The one thing that is missing from the Mac Mini renders that I've seen is the headphone jack. Unless we're going to get USB-C audio out specifically for lossless audio, that seems like the biggest omission to me. The Duke of Kidderminster asks, iCave answers, do you think that there'll be a mini event / product release in July? I think there's a decent possibility. I would put it at 50-50 right now, but we have heard that Apple might be having a hands-on product event in July, late July, maybe early August, and we heard this from Mark Gurman initially for some sort of AR type product or VR type product, because it's something that the press need to get their hands on in person to understand what it is and to be able to talk about it properly. Now, is that guaranteed? Absolutely not. But I think if we see anything about AR, VR from a developer standpoint this WWDC, then that's probably more likely. And I think we were told the 24th of July is a possible date for the event. Mac Daddy asks, iCave answers, the new basic iPad's coming soon. I haven't heard of any rumours about a new basic iPad, the $329 version, but went to buy one to upgrade my mum's iPad and couldn't find one anywhere, non-Apple stores. We went to 3 different places and all were out of stock of the base iPads. I looked at other stores in the chains we went to and they were out too. The Apple Online store has them, but delivery dates were 2 to 3 weeks out. Okay, as far as I know, there isn't anything just around the corner. I think we are going to be looking at September for these. I think the only thing is they might have been moving some of their production capacity over to the new products that we're expecting, the MacBook Pros, the iPad Pros that we've just had released. So it might be that they've just shifted some of the production capacity and there was still more demand than they expected for these, because there's still a lot of people working from home and people changing the way that they work at the moment. So I think that might be all it is. But who knows, maybe we'll get a surprise event or a surprise announcement very soon. Alan B Unboxings and News asks, Hi Cave Answers, will Apple let everyone put their Apple TV into recovery mode in the Apple Configurator 2 on iPad Pro instead of on a Mac? So for this, I'm assuming you mean because it's got the M1, will that be something you're able to kind of configure other systems on? And I can't see that that's something that many people would be wanting anyway. Using the configurator for recovery mode for an Apple TV, probably more of a developer thing than for most people. But I could see the iPad Pro becoming a kind of product that you would walk around as an IT pro with to actually solve some issues. So I don't see that it's impossible. I just don't think it's something that Apple is going to put a lot of focus on, even if you can. And that's it for today's show. Don't forget icavedave.com/merch to grab the commemorative t-shirt that we've done for WWDC21. And we will be live streaming later today. As soon as the audio event finishes, we'll be going live. So make sure you've subscribed, put your notifications on, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.